Ludum Dare is a game jam that runs two categories, the compo and the jam. In the compo, you must work alone for 48 hours from scratch, and then provide your source code at the end. The jam, on the other hand, lets you work with multiple people, and to come in with some art and code beforehand. For now, I'm preferring the jam category for that extra time, and to have a little bit of a springboard for generic assets to get up to speed quicker. I'm mainly participating to start up something small, and just to have a little fun. To get things going before the jam starts, I set up my project with Unity's HD render pipeline with a few old assets to help me get an idea for visuals, without only having gray boxes. Usually, I'd think it's odd to set up post-processing this early, but as I was at my day job this week, I've been leaning on having my goal be to be pushing for a visually appealing project. And if I don't end up finishing, I want to aim for having a good vertical slice of a game. I also wound up making a little character controller and an input system that I can expand on once the theme is announced and I know what I'm really going for. The themes for Ludum Dare are voted on throughout the week with a few rounds. The top bunch of each round then get thrown together into one last vote until the theme gets announced. For me, the theme gets announced at 9 PM, and that gives me an option to either stay up with an idea or to get some rest and think on it with a clear head in the morning. Unfortunately, I messed up a bit with scheduling this week for an art swap with friends, and that's kinda due on Saturday. And I was running a little late on modeling and UV mapping that, so it's not gonna be that easy for me to pull off. The theme turned out to be Life is Currency, and I immediately went on with working with some ideas in my head. However, the art swap project didn't get wrapped up until after midnight, and I only wound up writing some quick notes here and there where I could. It wasn't long before I decided that heading up to bed would be the healthiest option for myself. I came up with an idea though, where you'd play as a little robot fighting off waves of enemies that try to steal your energy from a solar panel. You'd be powered wirelessly through the solar panel, and the enemies would get stronger, so I'd give you the chance to trade your electricity for upgrades with Emergent. At the time I thought it would be a pretty cool idea, but after I woke up, I thought about the idea more, and ultimately decided to scrap it altogether. It must have been the work week or spending the day and night wrapping something up, but I was already not feeling that great. Heading out to get a meal sounded alright, and the drive would give me some time to tinker on some ideas. Although the original idea seemed doable, I felt that most of the work would go towards making interesting combat, which would require an interesting AI to play against. I'm sure that the AI would quickly grow into a time sink and oppose my goal for pushing for high quality visuals. When I got home, I immediately got started on this new idea. Unlike my original idea that leaned towards action, I wanted to dip into a narrative puzzle experience. You'd play as a little submarine of a sunken ship, tasked by a weakened AI. Your goal would be to search for an exit by attaching equipment to yourself that will drain your batteries while you get closer to the exit. I usually start off my workday with something easy to get myself going on a good pace. This time I experimented with using different post-process volumes for different states of the player's battery level. Afterwards, I laid out the groundwork for the game's main systems. The equipment manager tracks what the player has equipped and lets the player use their selective item. The battery manager handles the player's health and if they have enough energy for using an item. Lastly, I gave each a UI manager script to reflect their states. Then I sketched out a little interface in Photoshop and got to work on bringing that into Unity. I try not to stay cooped up in my chair too much for long stretches of time. Sometimes you'll feel that you're on a roll with a good rhythm, but in reality you're working much slower than earlier, and a break is definitely needed. Personally, I try to take regular time off between stopping points, to go out for a little walk to collect my thoughts and decide the next course of action. After a small coffee and a snack, I got back into tweaking the UI and adding in some actions into the input controller. While I could split the script into more appropriate scripts, I feel more organized listening for all the inputs in a single script and having those trigger an event that other scripts are subscribed to. At least then I won't have the circumstance where I have a bunch of scripts fighting over inputs through a chain of if statements, where I can handle messiness a lot better this way. One of the last things I touched on for the night is the items that your little submarine can equip. Items should have an upfront energy exchange to attach, and a smaller energy cost from using them. But they also shouldn't be too high of a cost that they'd hamper your life. more so something to keep in mind for the long run of your play life. One of the items is an electrical activator, where you just emit an amount of energy into the water to attempt to reactivate doors and computers. For this, I use a scriptable object to hold all the data on the item, including data for the UI, like names and some lore bits for the AI to talk about. Then to finally wrap things up, I unwinded with making the equipment UI and connecting in their references. And with that, my first full day of Ludum Dare was coming to a close, with quite a bit of work to show for myself. For today's quick startup task, I chose to fix a quick bug with the purchasing UI staying on and to open up a visual graph to see what I'd be working with from now on, since the older particle shaders are incompatible with HDRP. You've got to start somewhere with learning new features. The next thing on my docket for the day was switching which equipment you have selected. This was a bit of a puzzle at first, since I wanted the player to start off with nothing, but once you have an item, I never want the player to be able to switch back into having nothing. Also, I want the order of the items to be consistent based on which order you got them. I ignored the second part for a little bit, but after putting in some if statements, I scrapped my first implementation altogether to make way for a list of scriptable objects and 2 small if statements based on the count of the items. If you had no items, the UI would be disabled, but if you had 1 item, I would only disable the text to tell the player how to switch items. After spending 2 sessions on item work, the mechanic of draining a lot of energy per equipment felt a little draining on myself, to be honest, and I haven't even played the game entirely at all. I want to encourage the player to explore with their items, but at the same time, I don't want to cut their battery life drastically to have 2 or 3 items. Nor do I want the player to memorize where an item is on the map, so they're not backtracking in exchange for time, where I'd rather just have them be exploring. So I brainstormed up a solution for this problem that would surely become an issue in level design later on. After each time your sub dies, your AI reconstructs you for your next playthrough. So why not have the items also be reconstructed nearby, but with a much smaller energy input? Perhaps most of the energy input from the first equip time is being used for the AI to analyze the item. I didn't have anything too concrete for the submarine, but I did decide on a few style rules that I should go for. With the environment being submerged for a long period of time, the equipment should have that toll reflected. Panels should be detached from the walls, leaving wiring exposed. Sea life has already had its time to move in. Barnacles on the walls, with seaweed poking through exposed areas on the ground. There should be a mix of dulled out colors of the ship's prime being overtaken by more natural hues. The submarine will contrast the environment with metals untouched from the decay from being recently assembled. The next feature I decided to go for was a second submarine item, a torpedo. This lets the player access areas that are dangerous or collapsed. I'm betting that when it's fleshed out, it'll not only look rad, but also be a good learning opportunity for breaking down chaos. Things were going pretty smoothly for a while, but as I was getting to the 9th or 10th hour of working, I could definitely feel the fatigue kicking in. Unfortunately, it wasn't just fatigue. My chest was starting to bug me a little bit, and when it comes to health versus game jams, health is the all-time priority. Around 8 o'clock, I took out the rest of the night to recuperate and watch some Netflix with some friends to relax. At this point, I'm sure that the game will be unfinished, and if I'm feeling better tomorrow, I should try to see what else I can accomplish, within reason, of course. I started off the final day of the jam a little slow to make sure I was taking things easy. After a short homemade breakfast with plenty of water, I started up some light work. I dabbled around a bit with the scene's aesthetics again, and then moved on to messing around with the VFX graph for a little bubbler effect for the torpedoes, and possibly the player. It was at this point where I started to understand the ability of this new feature compared to the traditional shuriken particle system. As of this moment, I can see myself taking much longer to create a small and simple particle system, but in time that'll only decrease as I get familiar with the patterns and nodes. Are they nodes? I'm not really too sure, but this feels slightly similar to working with Designer, so I'm sure that the workflow will translate pretty smoothly. Now, if only I could have the backspace shortcut like Designer, where it auto-connects the nodes, that'd be pretty great if Unity could add that, and I am definitely crossing my fingers for that in the future. Anyways, after a short second dive into VFX Graph, I wanted to think of something that fit well into a visual atmospheric game. I already have the player being able to activate doors that are off the grid, so lights shouldn't be off the table either. At first I thought it was going to be a quick job of just lerping some values. I really wasn't that lucky though. When you attach a light component to a game object, you can get a few other components along for the ride if you're using the lightweight or HD rendered pipeline. Most of the light's variables are here in these scripts, but show up in the light components inspector. It's a little confusing, not gonna lie, but there are a lot of variables here, so it kinda makes sense why these are split off. Also, just in case anybody is trying to remake this in the future, this is under the experimental namespace, so without a doubt in my mind, the script is gonna break whenever HDRP comes out of preview. There was one last problem I wanted to tackle to feel comfortable with my progress over the weekend, and that was to save my progress, or rather the player's progress. For a maze-like game where I want to minimize accidental backtracking from just being lost, it's super important to me that the player can recognize an explored area. With that in mind, I want to pretty much save everything that the player can interact with from life to life, especially when they close the game and come back to it. It took a little bit to figure out a solution where I wouldn't need to constantly come back to this. My solution wound up being to have a new script that anything with an activatable base script depends on. In the saved entity asset script, it'd be assigned a unique ID to keep track of. Each time the level is loaded, it'll ask the script responsible for tracking all of the IDs for that level, what the player has interacted with. Pretty much it'll just be asking itself if it was interacted with in a previous playthrough. It all boils down into being a true-false checker that should manage itself. The last piece of this puzzle is a quick script to scan through all the IDs for duplicates and change them. But I think for now this is a good time to call my game jam work finished. Throughout the day, my upper body pain was slowly coming back in, and some downtime was definitely needed. Despite all the things that was going on, I'm pretty happy with how things are turning out, to be honest. I feel I've got a good base to work off of for a short little project. I've been wanting to do these videos again for a while, to be honest, but I wanted there to be a fine balance between art and code, so it doesn't become a little monotonous or have code on for most of the video. I think this project will strike a fine balance between that, and be pretty fun for myself as well. I'll do some videos on this project, and maybe some other content as well. If you love to see some of these, consider subscribing. It means a lot to me, and also, by the way, my chest is feeling a lot better from those few days off, and I feel pretty energized again. And I'll probably take it a little easier for future videos, instead of just trying to do just do a lot in a video. Until next time, have a good one.